Hello, my name is Ryan Magrum, and this is a practice video for a microteach for EDSE 4275. Today's lesson is on classifying living things. The title of this lesson is The Classification of Living Things for grade level 9 through 10. The objectives for students today: the students will be able to use a dichotomous key to classify living things and objects, and students will be able to develop their own method of classification and be able to develop their own dichotomous key. This lesson is covered by Science Content Standard for the 11th grade, Standard 1, Concepts and Processes, involving the system classification, order, and organization, and more specifically the 11th grade benchmark SC 11.1.3 Biological Evolution, specifically the phrase explain how organisms are classified based on similarities that reflect their evolutionary relationships, with species being the most fundamental unit of classification. We give meaning to things around us by giving them a description of how they look, behave, or fit into the world. We call this phenomenon classification. It's a foundation of biology. Have you ever wondered why we call trees plants and dogs animals? You, Jimmy, how do you know that a fern is a plant? Yes, Sarah in the back. Why is a horse a mammal? Okay, class, today we will be practicing our abilities to classify organisms and objects based on their characteristics. As you all remember from last class period, we learned about the domains and kingdoms and so on, for which we have used genetic methods to determine their similarity, the organism's similarities. For today, since we do not have access to these methods, we'll be using a dichotomous key to classify two groups of things, one organisms, one just plain everyday objects. This first group, a number of organisms that you will determine to belong to a more resolved level of classification, a more detailed group. And to show how you have succeeded in this adventure, you will record the correct pathway through the dichotomous key that I provide. The second group for our classifying practice is a collection of objects that I have made for you, for which you will make your own dichotomous key that is functional and practical. Keep in mind that the second part of the activity will take some time, so please work diligently and make your description simple and meaningful. This is the point in the lesson where I would give the students a worksheet which looks something like this, with pictures of animals, and next to it is where they would answer questions. Here I have 6 different things that they need to classify based on a dichotomous key, which I have written out. The students will go through the activity and write down each of the sections that each of these organisms fit into according to this dichotomous key. For the second part of the activity, the students will be designing their own dichotomous key based on objects, or based on materials that I've provided to them. Some of those would be a screw, a nail, a marble, a washer perhaps, a nut, a toothpick, and a rubber band, for which the students will have to classify and create a dichotomous key to classify these objects. If we take a closer look at the activity, I can provide an example of what the students are expected to complete. If we take a look at this grasshopper, you can see that the answer would be 3, 6, 9, and 10, which would refer to the sections of the dichotomous key which I have given them, where they would make their way through the dichotomous key and track the path that it takes. For instance, question 1 says, is this organism larger than a human? And if the answer is no, you go to question 3. Is this organism visible to the naked eye? Which you would reply yes, and you would write 3, which is the reason why 3 is the first number in the answer for that question. Question 6, is this organism furry? To which the answer is no. Go to question 9, and where 6 is another answer because it's part of the pathway in the dichotomous key. Question 9 says, does this organism have legs? You would say yes. Go to question 10, and that gives you the answer, the grasshopper. So you have 3, 6, 9, and 10. That will give you the correct answer, for which I would make sure that the class and the students know that that is how I would like them to answer these problems. The first part of this activity shouldn't take very long. For students with learning disabilities or students who have special needs, I would place these students together in a group while I would help them in that group. I could also partner these students with another classmate who could work through this by themselves, and together they could work through this activity. Or I could also shorten the first and second parts of this activity so they do not have to work through as many problems or come up as many options for their own dichotomous key. During the activity, I will be answering students' questions, but I will be careful not to provide them with the correct answers, but more or less lead them into the correct answer if they're having troubles. This activity may come with some time constraints. For instance, the second part of this activity may take students a lot longer to complete than I believe. If they do not complete it, we might take time for next class period to complete this activity. However, if they happen to finish this with more time left over than I perceive there to be, the students will be presenting their dichotomous keys to the class and explaining why they did a good job. The first part of this worksheet, where they classify the organisms, their success can be assessed by just how correct it is. So to quickly close this lesson, we would be going over the answers as a class to the first part. This is of course pending that there was enough time left after the lesson and the activity to do this. And then I would also close this lesson by letting the students know that that next class period we'll be going deeper into classification, and we'll be studying different kingdoms and studying the differences between the domains. If time has allowed, I would assess their work by assigning a number of points to the first part of the activity, and then taking points off or adding points to how correct their answers are. For the second part, where they design their own dichotomous key for these objects that I've given them, I would grade on completeness, consistency, not necessarily correctness, because that you can classify things.